Hello, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. This video is a little different from my traditional videos where I just do it outside and, kind of talking about the things that we deal with day to day on, mainly around, dealing with trucks and camping and things like that. Today, I decided to do something a little bit different and actually go through a few of the different types of RVs that you see out there. The reason why I thought about doing this is I've had the conversation probably a few times in the past 6 months or so. It kind of dawned on me that, and even though this has been done before, right? But it kind of dawned on me that a lot of people, when they're starting into this journey, if you will, of starting to RV, they don't really know much about all that's out there, right? They just ask, "Hey, what is an RV?" And don't really. They also don't really understand the things that they need, right? And I thought about putting some visuals together and that kind of thing to kind of aid the conversation. But I figured, hey, RV Trader is probably the best spot to go and at least to do some research, right? Obviously, you can go buy RVs in a lot of places, right? There's RV dealers probably local to you. There's Facebook Marketplace, but RV Trader is a pretty good place for me at least to do research. Right, you can actually go look at pictures of actual RVs. You can get a sense for spaces. Right, there's fairly amount of decent amount of data, so it's a good meta search, if you will, for everything that's out there for sale. Now, I wanted to talk about the different types of RVs that are out there, right? I got into the question quite a bit recently, like I was explaining earlier. And typically the question starts with, what do I need to know? Or how do I get into RVing, right? There's two main types of RVs, and we'll, hopefully try to answer the question. We can start doing like a series of these, right? I'm not trying to do a super long video here, but I'll try to go over a summary of what I know. Keep me honest in the comments below, right? And ask your questions, and we can start doing follow-ups to this, right? Hopefully this works, for to the benefit of everybody, right? That's what it's meant to be. So there's two different types of RVs, right? Some are motor homes, right? What people call motor homes, RVs you can drive, right? RV Trader does a really good job at just simplifying that. So that includes Class A's, Class B's, and Class C's. Think about all the way from vans, like you see on the screen here, to chassis cabs, and buses, right? Class A's, the big ones, and we'll go through those. I got multiple tabs, so we'll go through. And then we have the towable RVs. Now, when you get into motorhomes and towables, there's a few things that you have to take into account, right? The biggest thing, at least for me, my opinion, and we own a towable, and I think for the foreseeable future, there's nothing that will change that for us. For us, it's a big deal to have a vehicle that you can travel in. So whenever you're going to a place, especially short distance travels and so forth, you want to go sightseeing, you want to go to dinner, you want to do something else, you want to go to parks, you want to go on a hike. If you have a motorhome, it is arguably a little bit more difficult to have a vehicle to move around, right? Some people are completely okay with going into a campsite or some BLM land where they park, setting up, and then tearing down your entire campsite to take a drive, let's say if you're in a van, right? And that's totally okay. Some people, what they do is, especially in the Class C's and Class A's, Class B's not so much, but in Class C and Class A, some people are okay with towing a vehicle. So you can actually tow a vehicle with what we call a tow dolly. Feel free to look it up, which is essentially a vehicle, it's roll wheels on the ground. It's called neutral towing, and you just haul a vehicle behind you, right? And when you go down the highway, you see a big RV hauling typically a Jeep or something like that, right? The Jeep is the poster vehicle for this application. But all the types of vehicles that people tow, or some people haul a trailer behind them with a vehicle on top of it. Now, there's a few drawbacks to that, and things you got to start thinking about whenever you do that, and we can do more follow-ups on this, right? I've never done it before, so just caveat. But the things that I have seen is When you tow a vehicle neutral tow, just think that you're putting mileage on that vehicle regardless, right? Neutral tow, typically the vehicle has to be on, or sometimes it's off, but there's wear and tear that goes into that vehicle, right? The wheels are on the ground, and you have to keep that in mind. Also, the other thing is, very, very quickly in this topic, is you have to disconnect whenever you get to a site, right? So you get, and not different from, not very different from a towable, where you have to stop and disconnect the vehicle that you're towing, park it in a corner while you set up your camper. The other alternative, which is a trailer, right? Trailering a vehicle to your destination or through your journey, means that now, and that one's a little bit trickier, right? And probably less popular, I would say, in my experience of what I have seen. When you trailer a vehicle, that means that now, when you get to your campsite, you have to figure out what to do with that trailer. Some campgrounds will have a parking, or like an overflow parking, where you can park your trailer. Some will not. Some don't have the space and make you put the trailer on your campsite, or you have to figure out where to put it, right? Especially state parks are especially guilty of this. I live in North Carolina, so in state parks there's not really a whole lot of space to put those trailers. So those are things to keep in mind. Now, I think motorhomes in general, RVs that you can drive, are probably a fantastic idea, especially when you're traveling long distance. So I think for long distance travel, they're just more comfortable. It's just, better driving, better traveling experience overall, if you will. The other thing to keep in mind is safety. Obviously, these things, sometimes have 2 seats, and sometimes, people have to ride in the sofa or something like that. Some of these are coming nowadays, the sofas that have seat belts, which is a cool thing. But you have to keep that in mind. It's just like a quick safety thing to also keep in mind. And then the other thing is, they're expensive, and all RVs lose their value, but towable RVs are, sometimes they lose their value a little bit more, or motorhome RVs, excuse me. When it comes to towables, the one thing to keep in mind is, I'm not going to talk about truck campers. That's just a little different world, so I'm not going to talk about that. I don't know much about it. But anything from pop-ups to travel trailers and fifth wheels, once you start getting into, passing from the pop-up world and travel trailers, then you start talking about, okay, what vehicle am I going to haul this with, right? Pop-up trailers are typically, lightweight, 2,000 or 3,000 pounds maybe. And let's just start there. So pop-up trailers are these, right? Essentially, it's a collapsible trailer that you pop up, right? Typically, there's like a jack or, some mechanical function that allows the trailer to expand all the way up. And they're pretty cool, right? They're lightweight, they're small, right? This is, an indication of its length, right? 20 feet or so for these that look kind of big. So that's cool. And those are typically pretty lightweight. So let's pick one of these, for example. Let's go and look at the specs for one of these. So this is a Roguewood. It's a used unit. $17,000. Not too expensive to get started. Maybe a good place to get started. And I'm typically concerned with the weight. So let's look around and see if we see the weight. Oh, it does not have the weight listed here. Dealer's website. Let's go to that. Okay, you're gonna show me the actual camper? No, I won't. Anyways, these typically are pretty lightweight, so you can actually haul them with, some sort of SUV, or maybe, some sort of vehicle that has a decent towing capacity, right? When it comes to towables, this is something that's very, very, very important, right? Towing capacity, mostly tongue weight, right? Or payload capacity on vehicles. I am not, wanting to get into a tow police argument. If you want to know what the tow police is, just look on any camper forum out there. You'll see, a lot of heavy discussions, right? And, I think typically comes from a good place, and then it goes out of control, right? Me personally, I would like everybody to be safe, especially because, we're out there on the road, and I don't want anybody towing irresponsibly, crashing into my family, right? It's me personally, I just kind of leave it out there. So whenever you're towing a trailer, you have to be, just be safe, right? So these are pretty lightweight. Typically, you can tow them with, small crossover vehicle, crossover SUV. I've seen some of these being towed by something like Subaru Outbacks or, Toyota RAV4s, things like that, right? It just depends on the size of the trailer or small pickup trucks, right? Once you start getting into bigger ones, so once you start getting into travel trailers, then we start talking, this is a different story. When people think about travel trailers, now this is a bigger thing, right? Typically not a collapsible unit. It's not a pop-up. And Airstream is like the poster child, if you will, for the travel trailer. Right? This is what you've seen in all the old movies and things like that. Airstreams are very expensive, very good quality, right? All aluminum outdoor. That's what they're famous for. Very good quality on the outside, but they're just cost prohibitive sometimes. So typical travel trailer for, especially when you're starting out, this is typically what you'll be looking at. Things like this. Now, there are some very small travel trailers that can be pulled with small vehicles. Um, do your research. Look at your vehicle's towing capacity and, more important, payload. Some of these travel trailers, especially the majority of travel trailers, tow very heavy, and a lot of people will say they're a sail wind, if you will, right? They're like they tow like a sail behind your truck or behind your vehicle, and this is specifically true in my experience. I like to have a heavier vehicle when I'm towing because RVs tend to sway quite a bit and the wind moves them around. So, do with that information what you will, right? But choose your vehicle appropriately. So, travel trailers can range from anything from, 16, 15 feet all the way through 40 something feet. One thing to keep in mind with very short trailers, you can probably tow them with, virtually a lot of vehicles. Once you start getting into the heavier trailers, right? In my opinion, anything over 7,000-8,000 pounds, you're already getting into, big tow vehicle territory. Me especially, we tow a Grand Design Imagine 2800 BH, which is an 8,000 pound unit, and we tow it with a 3/4 ton heavy duty truck. The reason for that is because I have towed with a half ton, an F-150 before. And yeah, if you've seen on the videos, we have an F-250 now. But we've towed with an F-150 before, and the wind just, kind of, the tail wags the dog, as the expression goes, right? And that's not a very comfortable driving experience, especially with long distance. So once you start getting into the heavier vehicles, and it gets a little bit more expensive. But typically, this is what a travel trailer would look like. Like I said, anywhere from 15 to 43 feet long. Typically recommended to use weight distribution bars, so weight distribution hitches with them, because even though they're tiny, they don't tow like a car hauler or like a normal flatbed trailer, right? Typically, because they are in boxes, the wind pushes them around and they're not evenly, the weight is not spread evenly, right? You have appliances on one side, typically you have beds around, you have water tanks and stuff like that. So weight distribution bars recommended. And that's kind of what a travel trailer looks like. Also, one thing to keep in mind is the length of a travel trailer will dictate how restrictive you can be when you're trying to fit on a site. If you go to reserve a campsite somewhere in a state park, particularly, they ask, typically every place they ask you for your length. And the longer your vehicle, the more difficult it will be to fit it in certain places. And also travel trailers that are very long, especially, getting over, my opinion, anything over 37, 38 feet, it's already getting pretty long. And because the tongue sticks out, if the box is 30 feet or 34 feet, that means that you'll get another 34, 4 or 5 feet extra because of the tongue. So that makes it more difficult. Now, when you start getting into the big trailers, then you start looking at the world of fifth wheels. So with fifth wheels, the reason or the way that these work is essentially this overhang here of the trailer goes over the back of the truck. So for this, you require a truck. It must be, right? There's no SUV that can tow, or maybe there is, and I'm wrong, but there's no SUV that can tow a fifth wheel that I know of. And typically these are getting pretty long, right? These are 37.8 MBS unit. This is a 41 feet unit, I think, or something like that. These are getting pretty big, pretty heavy. Typically looking at heavy duty truck territory. There are some that claim to be towable by half-ton trucks, right? Like an F-150, Silverado 1500, Ram 1500, or a Tundra, or something like that, or a Nissan Titan. That's a debate for a different day. I think some of them have pretty low weights, right? Some of them weigh like 8,000 pounds. I think those are probably fine, but there are some that are just pushing it. So this is more, if you see here, there's a dually vehicle towing it, right? These are pretty big trailers, more comfortable inside. Tend to be larger, a little bit more, or quite a bit more expensive. You see a 2019 for $48,000, quite a bit more expensive, but it's just more roomy. They're bigger. They have more slide outs, so they expand. That's another thing that I didn't quite touch into is when it comes to Airstreams, one thing that's particular about them, they don't have any slides. That means they don't expand um, to the sides, right, horizontally, if you will. And then fifth wheels are complete opposite, right? They have multiple slides, 4, 5, 6 slides sometimes that make it just way bigger. Again, another consideration is, like I was mentioning earlier, you have to keep in mind that if you have an RV that's too big, then you won't be able to fit in certain places. So just one thing to keep in mind. Also, where you live dictates, how this goes. If you live closer to a big city, right, probably you have to drive a ways to find more expensive places. If you live out west, right, typically, Utah, Montana, some of those places, anything that I have seen and the research that I've done, a lot of the BLM land, right, it's all very open. So you got big spaces to kind of park around and deal with. So it's easier to live one of these. Now, the other type of towable, and we have to go into the drivables in a minute. The other type of towables are toy haulers. Now, toy haulers could be anything from a travel trailer type to a fifth wheel. The difference is that a toy hauler will have what we call a garage. So if I can expand on this Fusion here. So, here we go. So this is very, very, very big trailer. 4x4. It's probably very long, very heavy. 3 axles, right? That tells you it's huge, right? This thing is very big. The typical, or the thing that kind of makes a toy hauler unique is that they will have a garage door, right? This is actually a door that opens in its entirety, and it's a ramp. That door becomes a ramp, and it becomes a toy hauler, right? And what that means is you can haul your toys in it. So if you see this picture here, there's a side-by-side right in there. Typically what happens, people put, their side-by-sides inside of this trailer, or their four-wheelers or golf carts sometimes, or what have you, inside of these. There are certain conveniences that come with this type of setup. Sometimes this door can be, or this ramp, if you will, can be opened flat and converts into a porch. That's kind of cool. But then the other downside is typically there are beds back here because this takes quite a bit of space, right? Sometimes the garages are 14, 16 feet. So the beds are kind of up top, and they you can pull them down, but that means that there's no actual bedroom in the back, right? Typically it's just some space back there. Sometimes there's a division between the space where you store the toys and things like that. But there's just certain things that come along with this, right? Some of these have a half bathroom back here. Typically what I have seen, they don't have a lot of storage for like clothing and things like that. So those are things to consider, right? You would think, hey, the toy hauler is probably the best of both worlds. There's just certain limitations that it has that something like a bunkhouse or something like that would have, right? And that's getting into the different types of trailers, right? Travel trailers, you can get them into different floor plans, and one of the popular ones, at least for people like with families like me, it's a bunkhouse, right? That's what we have. That means that it has bunks. So a toy hauler will have something like like that. Sometimes it'll have bunks that you can collapse and stuff like that, but it doesn't have the storage. It doesn't have the separate bedroom typically, right? There are some exceptions to that. Hopefully that gives you an idea of what the towables are, and let's just go through these very quickly. I don't know a whole ton about these, but let's start with the Class Bs, right? This is not, I've never had one of these, but what I've seen in my experience, right? This is, kind of my comments are based on that. So Class Bs are typically vans, right? When you hear people out there on TikTok and stuff doing the van life, right? Some of these are prefabs, right? You can actually buy them. They're a little bit expensive, right? Compared to travel trailers and so forth and fifth wheels, right? Sometimes these can cost as much as a fifth wheel or more. These are particularly nice, right? I think these are made by these are Sprinters, and they're made by Airstream sometimes. This is an Arriva. These are very, 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 very nice, right? But the downside with these is, like I said, typically you don't tow much with them, so you will need to hold this thing out if you want to go sightseeing or if you want to go to dinner and stuff like that, right? Unless you bring a separate vehicle with you. So kind of one of the quick downsides to go along or to understand about these. Now, you start getting into a little bit bigger units, you start looking at Class Cs. And what Class Cs are is just typically a chassis cab, typically a Ford or a Chevy or a Ram van or a chassis cab. That means that the cab comes, essentially with, Ford sells just the cab, the engine, and a long chassis, and then some outfitter, right? Freedom, Thor, Forest River, some of these, RV companies put a RV behind it. These are very nice, like I said initially, for long travel. But you have to think about, okay, do I want to tow a vehicle behind it? Do I want to trailer a vehicle behind it if I need it, or am I just going to stay at the campsite all the time when I leave? Right? We are weekenders specifically. We travel long distance sometimes and stay a whole week somewhere, once or twice a year. For the most part, we're weekenders. So for us, a drivable RV would make little sense. Just because a truck, we do is we have a truck, and our truck is just more useful that way. And we're gonna finish with the Class A. So I realize this video is kind of getting away from me here on time, so hopefully it's not too long. And like I said, right, feel free to put comments down below, or we can address questions or any comments, any concerns you may have later. The last thing is Class A's, and this is not. This is kind of reflective of Class A's are. These are buses, right? These are things that artists travel around with, right? Some of these, almost new units, prices are pretty insane. You can actually get Class A's for, decent prices. There are some smaller Class A's that are single axle like this one. These are Euro style. Well, there are some of these, like for example, this is 23 Georgetown Series 3. You can look at some of these, and they're fairly comfortable, fairly big, and not too huge. But they're cool units, right? They're a little bit more expensive, like I said. Value retention sometimes is a little low on them, but they're just different, right? Some people, sometimes your situation dictates that you may want to travel in one of these things, right? Like I was saying earlier, you start looking at the pictures in some of these, they're cool looking. And this is what I was referring to earlier, right? You typically will have 2 seats that have seat belts, and then anybody else that's traveling with you will have to travel on the sofas or in the dinette. So sometimes you have to take that into account, right? Anything like an accident, especially blowouts, right? If you have a blowout on a steer tire, especially on these units, it becomes quite, a scary incident. I've seen some videos. So, I think, proper maintenance will help you avoid some of those things. But, things happen. So just keep that in mind when you're putting your family in one of these things. But yeah, these are cool looking units. They're bigger. Like I said, you have to keep in mind whether you want to tow a vehicle behind you, just like you are with Class C's. So when you're deciding what type of RV you want, I guess in summary, you have to figure out from this summary page here, and we're gonna stop it here and answer any questions later. You have to think about, okay, do I want to drive in a unit, but do I want to tow a vehicle behind me, or do I want to trailer a vehicle behind me if I need it? Or if I don't, then that's totally fine. If you're gonna get into towable RVs, then you got to think about, okay, not just the RV, right? The RVs are cool, and sometimes we go and start looking at, okay, what's the prettier RV? What's the roomiest? What's the one that can fit all my family with all my stuff in it? But you also have to think about, what are you gonna tow it with, and are you gonna be comfortable traveling in that vehicle, right? So if you tow, if you're gonna tow with the truck and it's only 2 people, then that's great. You can get a single cab truck that will do the job. You can get, if you're towing something smaller, you can get an SUV, and that'll do fine. If you're bringing a family, especially anything about 5, then you got to start thinking about, okay, this is now becoming a bigger thing, right? You can fit up to 5 people in a crew cab truck, so that's the easy decision, right? In my opinion, if you have the budget, get a truck, something that's more than capable of towing what you want to tow. That way you don't have to worry about, safety and all the tow police concerns. If you don't, then you got to start looking at, okay, what fits my tow vehicle? And especially tow capacity is important, but more and more important, payload. The payload of your vehicle matters a lot. So keep that in mind when you're doing your initial research. Hopefully this is helpful. Give it a like if you think it's useful for you. Ask questions below in the comment section. If there are some questions, I will gladly do a video or a short answering some of these. I'm not claiming to be know-it-all, but we've been doing this for about 4 years now. So, accumulated quite a bit of knowledge. I've done a little bit of research. So hopefully, the knowledge that we've accumulated is helpful for everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one.